Hey, Ben. Everything all right?
Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest for the death of Eleanor Gable.
What? This is insane. It's a mistake. You know me.
The recording begins without fanfare. There's no dramatic opening, just the mundane hum of an air conditioner and the soft rustle of polyester uniforms. The video feed is jerky at first, a view of scuffed tile floor and the leg of a metal desk before it steadies. It's the perspective of a body camera that has been placed, perhaps forgotten, on a filing cabinet. It's angled just enough to capture the heart of the room, the office of Harmony Creek's chief of police, Nolan Reed. The timestamp in the corner reads 8:14 p.m. On screen, we see the back of a young officer, his posture ramrod straight. This is Officer Ben Carter, 26 years old, a cop for just 3 years, but with a reputation for being squared away by the book. He's the kind of officer every chief wants on their force, unquestioning, disciplined, eager to prove himself. He stands at parade rest, his hands clasped behind his back, a silent testament to the hierarchy of the room. Across from him, behind the imposing oak desk, is the man who commands that loyalty, Chief Nolan Reed. At 38, Reed is younger than most chiefs in the region, a fact he wears as a badge of honor. He's handsome in a rugged, all-American way, with a politician's smile and the confident air of a man who has never known failure. He leans back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. He looks relaxed, but the camera, unblinking and impartial, captures the tightness around his eyes, the subtle clenching of his jaw. He's a predator at ease in his own hunting ground. "Carter," the chief begins, his voice a low, confidential rumble. "You did good work tonight. Fast response. Secured the scene. Textbook." "Thank you, Chief," Carter replies, his voice crisp. He hasn't turned to face the camera, but you can hear the pride in his tone. "But we have a problem," Reed continues, his voice dropping even lower. He leans forward, his forearms resting on a stack of paperwork. The benevolent boss persona evaporates, replaced by something colder, more calculating. "The preliminary report from dispatch. It's messy. Witnesses saw a dark-colored truck, late model. That's all they've got. Not enough to go on." "We'll find it, sir," Carter says with certainty. "We'll canvass the area, check every body shop, run DMV records for—" "No," Reed cuts him off. The single word hangs in the air, sharp and absolute. "We're not going to find it. We're going to find him." He slides a small, clear plastic evidence bag across the desk. Inside is a single, greasy lug nut, the kind you'd find in any auto shop. The camera's angle isn't perfect, but the object is unmistakable. "This was found at the scene, near the point of impact." Carter shifts his weight. A beat of silence passes. "I didn't see that logged, Chief. My scene report was comprehensive." "It was overlooked," Reed says smoothly, his eyes locking onto Carter's. "It happens. Stress of the situation. But forensics will match it. It's a specific make, the kind used on the custom rims that Thorne's auto body specializes in." The name drops into the room with the force of a physical blow. Marcus Thorne, a black man who owned the most successful auto shop in town, a community figure, a sponsor of the local Little League, a man known for his integrity. Carter's ramrod posture slackens almost imperceptibly. "Marcus Thorne? Sir, he was at the town hall meeting tonight, until 7:30. I saw him there myself." "A hit and run doesn't take long, Ben," Reed counters, his voice laced with a predatory patience. "And people get things wrong. Times, dates. It's why we rely on physical evidence." He pushes the baggie an inch closer to Carter. "His shop works on high-end trucks, dark ones. He's had a couple of DUIs in his youth, a history. It's a narrative that makes sense." The implication is ugly and suffocating. Reed isn't presenting a theory, he's issuing a directive. He's handing Carter the pieces of a story and ordering him to assemble it. "Sir," Carter starts, his voice strained, "are you suggesting we focus the investigation exclusively on Mr. Thorne?" I'm not suggesting anything. Reed's voice turns to steel. I'm telling you where the evidence leads, and you, as the primary officer on the scene, are going to follow it. You're going to write a supplemental report. You're going to note that you recovered this piece of evidence and secured it. You're going to run Thorne's name, and you're going to see what you find. Am I clear? The room is silent again, save for the hum of the AC. The unblinking eye of the body camera records it all. Officer Carter's rigid back, the glint of light off the evidence bag, and Chief Reed's steady, unwavering gaze. It's a gaze that doesn't ask for agreement, but demands compliance. It's the look of a man who has drawn a line in the sand and is daring his subordinate to cross it. Ben Carter stands there, trapped between the man he swore to follow and the oath he took to uphold the law. In that small, quiet office, under the impartial gaze of a forgotten camera, a young officer's career, an innocent man's life, and a town's illusion of justice are all being steered toward a devastating collision. The chief doesn't know he's being recorded. He believes this conversation is a secret, a whisper between two men bound by the blue wall of silence. But the machine on the filing cabinet keeps listening, its quiet hum the only sound of protest in a room where a terrible lie is being born. To understand how Chief Nolan Reed could sit in his office and calmly orchestrate the destruction of an innocent man, you have to understand Harmony Creek. And to understand Harmony Creek, you have to understand the myth of Nolan Reed. He wasn't just the chief of police, he was the town's favorite son, its protector, its living embodiment of success. Harmony Creek is a town built on appearances. Nestled in a valley, it's a postcard of Americana, with a manicured town square, a proud flagpole, and storefronts that look like they were pulled from a Norman Rockwell painting. It's the kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked, where the high school football team is the biggest news of the week, and where problems are generally swept under the welcome mat. The town prided itself on its low crime rate, its sense of community, and its unwavering support for law enforcement. Nolan Reed was the architect of that pride. He'd grown up in Harmony Creek, the star quarterback who led the Hornets to a state championship, the local boy who went away to college on a scholarship, got a degree in criminology, and then, against all expectations, came home. He joined the Harmony Creek Police Department at 22, and his ascent was meteoric. He was smart, ambitious, and possessed an almost supernatural ability to connect with people. He could calm a domestic dispute with a few quiet words and charm the town council into approving a budget increase in the same afternoon. When the old chief retired, there was no real contest. At 34, Nolan Reed became the youngest police chief in the town's history. To the people of Harmony Creek, it felt right. He was one of them. He understood their values. He was the guardian at the gate, and under his watch, everyone felt safe. He cultivated his image with the precision of a master strategist. He was a constant presence at town events, flipping burgers at the 4th of July picnic, reading to kids at the library, and leading the Memorial Day parade. He started a Coffee with the Chief program, where he'd sit in the town's only diner for an hour every month, answering questions and listening to concerns. He spoke of community-first policing and the unbreakable bond between his officers and the citizens they serve. The local paper, the Harmony Creek Herald, ran glowing profiles on him, calling him the Golden Boy and the Modern Sheriff. But behind the perfect facade, a different man existed. Within the walls of the police station, Reed ruled not through community spirit, but through absolute control. He demanded unwavering loyalty, and he rewarded it handsomely. Officers who fell in line, who understood that the chief's version of events was the only version that mattered, saw promotions, favorable shifts, and plum assignments. Those who questioned him, who stuck too rigidly to the letter of the law when it was inconvenient, found themselves on permanent night shifts, their requests for new equipment denied, their careers stagnating. Reed saw the law not as a sacred text, but as a flexible tool, something to be shaped to serve his primary objective, maintaining order. And to him, order meant preserving the town's pristine image, and by extension, his own. A messy, unsolved hit-and-run committed by an unknown driver was a stain on that image. It suggested chaos, a lack of control. It was a problem. But a swift arrest, a clear suspect with a plausible, if manufactured, backstory, that was a solution. It was clean, decisive, and reinforced the narrative that Chief Reed kept his town safe. His ambition was a ravenous, hidden thing. Harmony Creek was not his final destination. He had his eyes on a county sheriff position, maybe even state-level politics down the road. Every success in Harmony Creek was a stepping stone, another line on his resume. He needed a flawless record, a town that ran like a well-oiled machine, and he was willing to do whatever it took to maintain that illusion. This was the man Officer Ben Carter had idolized. Like many of the younger officers, Carter had seen Reed as the future of law enforcement. He was drawn to Reed's confidence, his charisma, his vision of a respected modern police force. Carter had joined the HCPD specifically to work for him. He had bought into the myth completely, and that was Reed's true genius. He didn't just command his officers, he inspired a kind of devotion that blurred the lines between professional duty and personal loyalty. He made them feel like they were part of something special, a brotherhood protecting a small slice of paradise. He was a father figure, a mentor, a leader. To defy him wasn't just insubordination, it was a betrayal. That evening, as Ben Carter stood in his office, Reed was leveraging every ounce of that carefully constructed myth. He wasn't just giving an order, he was testing Carter's faith. He was asking Carter to choose between the abstract principles of the law and the tangible, breathing reality of the man who had defined his career. The chief was confident in his power, in the foundation of trust and control he had spent years building. In his mind, there was no choice to be made. Carter would fall in line. They always did. The golden boy of Harmony Creek was used to getting his way, and he had no reason to believe tonight would be any different. The official narrative, the one being carefully constructed in Chief Reed's office, was a lie built on a foundation of convenience. The truth of what happened on the Old Mill Road that evening was simpler, more human, and far more chaotic. It began, as many tragedies do, with a moment of stupid, reckless pride. The sun was bleeding across the western sky, painting the clouds in shades of orange and purple. It was the kind of spectacular sunset that forces drivers to slow down, to pull over and just watch. But Leo Vance wasn't watching the sky. He was watching the speedometer on his brand-new jet-black Ford F-250. The truck was his pride and joy, a monstrous machine he'd spent a fortune on, lifting the suspension and adding custom rims. He was 32, worked a construction job he hated, and lived in the shadow of his older, more successful cousin, Nolan Reed. This truck was the one thing that was entirely his, a symbol of power and status that made him feel like he measured up. He was coming home from a bar 2 towns over, where he'd had 3 beers, not enough to feel drunk, but just enough to feel invincible. The Old Mill Road was a winding, 2-lane country road, mostly deserted at this hour. He pushed the truck, reveling in the roar of the engine as he took a sharp curve faster than he should have. That's when he saw her, an elderly woman, maybe in her 70s, walking on the shoulder of the road, her back to him. It was Mrs. Gable, a widow who lived a quarter-mile down the road and took a walk every evening, rain or shine. Leo saw her a split second too late. He yanked the wheel to the left, his heart lurching into his throat. The massive truck swerved, its oversized tires kicking up gravel. He overcorrected, swinging the wheel back to the right. The back end of the truck fishtailed, and for a horrifying moment he lost control completely. He didn't feel the main impact. He heard it. A sickening thud, followed by the shattering of his passenger side headlight and the high-pitched screech of metal scraping against the guardrail. The truck spun to a halt in the middle of the road, steam hissing from under the crumpled hood. For a few seconds, Leo just sat there, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, the sound of his own ragged breathing filling the cab. The engine had stalled. The world was terrifyingly quiet. He fumbled with the door handle and stumbled out onto the asphalt. The air smelled of burnt rubber and leaking coolant. He looked back down the road. Mrs. Gable was lying in the ditch, unmoving. Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. He knew he should run to her, check on her, call for help, but all he could think about were the beers he'd had, the speed he was going, the fact that his insurance had lapsed 2 weeks ago. He saw his life unraveling in an instant. The truck impounded, his license revoked, jail time. He saw the disappointment in his family's eyes, the smug look on his cousin's face. His hand was shaking so violently he could barely unlock his phone. He didn't dial 911. He scrolled through his contacts, his thumb hovering over the one name he knew could fix anything, the one person who had always cleaned up his messes. He pressed the call button. "Nolan? It's me," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm in trouble. Real trouble. On the Old Mill Road." On the other end of the line, Chief Nolan Reed listened. Leo's frantic, incoherent story tumbled out. The curve, the woman, the ditch. He didn't say she was dead, but his tone implied the worst. Reed didn't ask questions. He didn't yell. His voice was unnervingly calm, the voice of a man taking control of a crisis. "Stay there. Don't talk to anyone. Don't touch anything," Reed commanded. "Are you hurt?" "No, I don't think so," Leo stammered. "Is anyone else there? Did anyone see?" "No, the road's empty. It was just me." "Good," Reed said. "Get in your truck and drive it to the old abandoned quarry off Route 9. Leave it there. Wipe down the steering wheel, the door handles, everything. Then walk home. Go through the woods, not the main roads. I'll handle the rest. Do you understand me, Leo?" It wasn't a suggestion. It was an extraction plan. Leo, sobbing with a mixture of terror and relief, agreed. He didn't look back at the ditch as he managed to get the battered truck started and limped away from the scene, leaving behind a dying woman and the wreckage of his own conscience. Minutes later, a passing motorist saw Mrs. Gable and called 911. The call went out to all units. Officer Ben Carter, who was just finishing a routine traffic stop nearby, was the first to respond. He arrived to find a scene of quiet horror, with no vehicle in sight, only a scattering of debris, a broken headlight lens, black paint scraped along the guardrail, and the tragic still form of a beloved town resident. The official investigation into the hit-and-run of Eleanor Gable had begun, but the real story was already being buried, covered over by a frantic phone call and a bond thicker than blood. While Officer Ben Carter was methodically securing the scene on Old Mill Road, taping off the area and trying to console the horrified motorist who had found Mrs. Gable, Chief Nolan Reed was moving with a chilling sense of purpose. He wasn't at the station, and he wasn't at home. He was in his unmarked department SUV, driving not toward the crime scene, but in the opposite direction, toward the industrial edge of town. He didn't use his radio. He knew every transmission was logged. This part of his plan required complete silence, complete deniability. His mind was a flurry of calculations, assessing risks and formulating a new, solidifying narrative. Leo was a liability, a screw-up, but he was family. Protecting him was instinct. But this was more than just covering for a cousin. It was an opportunity to seize control of a chaotic situation and mold it into something that served his own purposes. A tragic, unsolved crime was a failure of his leadership. A swift, decisive arrest was a victory. He just needed the right villain. His destination was a small, fenced-in lot behind Thorne's auto body. It was after hours, the shop dark and locked up tight. But Reed knew the property. He knew there was a section of the chain-link fence at the back, hidden by overgrown bushes, where the links were loose. He slipped through with practiced ease. The yard was filled with the skeletons of cars and trucks, vehicles waiting for repair or stripped for parts. Reed moved through the darkness with the quiet confidence of a man who believed he was invisible. He knew what he was looking for. Marcus Thorne had a reputation for quality work, but he, like every mechanic, had a scrap pile, a collection of discarded parts, rusted bolts, and old tires. His phone's flashlight cut a narrow beam through the dark. He found the pile near a dumpster. He scanned the ground, his eyes searching for one specific thing. And then he saw it. A small handful of heavy-duty lug nuts, discarded from a recent custom wheel job. They were greasy, weathered, perfect. They told no specific story of their own, which meant they could be made to tell his. He pulled a pair of latex gloves from his pocket, a standard part of his duty gear, and carefully picked one up. He dropped it into an evidence bag he'd brought from his vehicle. The whole process took less than 5 minutes. He slipped back through the fence, a ghost in the night, leaving no trace he was ever there. Now he drove toward the crime scene. As he got closer, he finally clicked on his radio, his voice the picture of calm authority. "Dispatch, this is Chief Reed. I'm en route to the scene on Old Mill. What's Officer Carter's status?" The dispatcher gave him the update. Carter had secured the scene. Paramedics had arrived and pronounced the victim deceased. Reed acknowledged the transmission with a solemn, professional tone. He was now officially part of the response. He arrived on Old Mill Road to a scene of flashing red and blue lights. He parked his SUV and got out, his face a mask of grim determination. He strode over to Ben Carter, who was giving a preliminary statement to a senior sergeant. "Carter," Reed said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Walk me through it." Carter, looking pale and shaken, recounted what he'd found: the victim, the debris, the lack of a suspect vehicle. He was professional, precise, exactly the kind of officer Reed knew he was. Reed listened intently, nodding. He surveyed the scene, his gaze sweeping over the road, the ditch, the guardrail. Then, he did something that seemed perfectly natural. He walked a few paces away from the main cluster of officers, toward the shoulder of the road, as if trying to get a different perspective on the trajectory of the crash. His back was to most of the other cops. With a subtle movement, almost impossible to see in the chaotic swirl of lights, he let the evidence bag fall from his hand into the tall grass, a few feet from a patch of scuffed-up gravel. He took another few steps, then turned back, his flashlight beam now methodically scanning the ground he'd just walked over. "Hold on," he called out, his voice sharp. "Over here, what's this?" He crouched down, his light focused on the evidence bag. Ben Carter and the sergeant hurried over. "Looks like a lug nut," Reed said, picking it up. "Doesn't look like it's been out here long. Could have been knocked loose on impact." He handed the bag to Carter. "Bag and tag this. Make sure it gets to the lab first thing. This could be what breaks the case for us, Ben. Good work tonight. You kept a clear head and secured this scene perfectly. Now let's find the bastard who did this." In that moment, he wasn't just a chief of police. He was a master of manipulation. He had planted the seed of his lie, but he made Carter believe he was the one who had found it. He praised Carter's work, reinforcing his role as a mentor and leader, making the young officer a partner in a discovery that was, in reality, a carefully staged deception. He gave Carter ownership of the lie, making it that much harder for him to ever question it. As the crime scene unit began its meticulous work, photographing and cataloging every piece of debris, Nolan Reed stood back and watched, his expression somber. He had taken Leo's chaotic, panicked mistake and transformed it into a controlled, solvable crime. He had a piece of evidence, a theory of the case, and a target. The anatomy of the lie was complete. All that was left was to spring the trap. 2 days passed. To the town of Harmony Creek, they were days of shock and mourning. Mrs. Gable had been a fixture in the community, and her violent, senseless death left a wound. To Officer Ben Carter, they were days of relentless, focused police work. And to Marcus Thorne, they were just 2 ordinary days of running his business and living his life, completely unaware that his name was at the center of a closing net. Under Chief Reed's direct and constant guidance, the investigation moved with incredible speed. The lug nut, the key piece of evidence, was sent to the state crime lab with a priority request. The report came back confirming it was from a specific brand of aftermarket wheels, a brand Marcus Thorne's shop frequently installed. It was a circumstantial link, but Reed treated it like a smoking gun. He had Carter and another detective pull every work order from Thorne's shop for the past 6 months. They found a dozen jobs involving late-model, dark-colored trucks. Reed ordered surveillance on Marcus's home and business. He told his officers they were looking for a man who was acting nervous, a man trying to hide something. When the surveillance reports came back showing nothing more than Marcus Thorne living his normal life, going to work, having dinner with his wife, closing up his shop at night, Reed interpreted it as the cold calm of a guilty man. Ben Carter did his job. He followed the orders, chased the leads, and wrote the reports. But a seed of doubt, planted during that late-night conversation in Reed's office, had taken root. Why the intense, singular focus on Thorne? Why weren't they pursuing other leads with the same vigor? He'd suggested running a list of all registered dark-colored trucks in the county, a standard procedure. But the chief had dismissed it as a waste of resources. "Follow the evidence, Carter," Reed had said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "And the evidence points to Thorne's." On the third day, Reed called Carter into his office. "It's time," he said, his face set like stone. "The DA agrees we have enough for a warrant. Probable cause. You'll lead the arrest. I want it done clean, by the book." The choice of Carter to lead the arrest was no accident. It was the final step in making him complicit. The officer who finds the evidence, who writes the reports, who puts the cuffs on the suspect, that officer is bound to the case. He is the primary witness. To question the arrest later would be to question his own actions, his own integrity. The arrest took place in broad daylight. It was just after lunch and the main street of Harmony Creek was bustling. Marcus was walking back to his shop from the diner holding a cup of coffee when two patrol cars silently boxed him in. Ben Carter got out of the lead car, his heart pounding against his ribs. He felt the eyes of everyone on the street turn to him. "Marcus Thorne," Carter said, his voice sounding hollow and unfamiliar to his own ears. Marcus stopped, a look of pure confusion on his face. He knew Carter, had serviced his personal car a few times. "Hey, Ben, everything all right?" "Sir, I need you to place your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for the death of Eleanor Gable." The color drained from Marcus's face. The coffee cup slipped from his hand, splashing across the sidewalk. "What? You've got to be kidding me. Mrs. Gable? Ben, this is a mistake. I was at the town hall meeting. People saw me." "Please, sir, don't make this difficult," Carter said, his training kicking in, his voice becoming a flat, official monotone. He took Marcus by the arm. "A mistake? This is insane!" Marcus's voice rose, a mixture of disbelief and outrage. People were stopping on the sidewalk, their cell phones suddenly emerging. The public humiliation, the sheer shock of the accusation, was a form of violence in itself. His reputation, built over 20 years of hard work and honest dealings, was being dismantled in a matter of seconds on a sunny afternoon. Carter holstered his weapon and cuffed Marcus, the metallic click of the handcuffs echoing in the sudden silence of the street. He recited the Miranda rights, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. He could feel Marcus trembling, not from fear, but from a rage born of profound injustice. He saw the betrayal in Marcus's eyes, a look that wasn't just directed at him, but at the entire system the uniform represented. As he placed Marcus in the back of the patrol car, Carter caught his own reflection in the window. He saw the uniform, the badge, the stoic expression he'd been trained to maintain. But behind it, he saw a man he barely recognized, a man who was following orders that felt fundamentally wrong. Back at the station, Marcus Thorne was booked, fingerprinted, and photographed. His life was officially and irrevocably altered. Chief Nolan Reed observed the process from a distance, his arms crossed, a look of solemn satisfaction on his face. He had his man. The case was, for all intents and purposes, closed. He had restored order to Harmony Creek. But as Officer Ben Carter sat down to write the arrest report, the image of Marcus's face, the sound of the coffee cup hitting the pavement, and the cold, hard memory of his chief's directive all collided in his mind. He had done his duty. He had followed the evidence as he was told. But for the first time in his promising young career, he felt the sickening weight of a lie. And he was beginning to understand that he was no longer just an officer of the law, but a key character in a story he didn't believe. Let's go back. Back to that quiet office just hours after the hit and run. Back to the moment that would define everything that came after. The body camera on the filing cabinet, left on by accident after Officer Carter had used it to record a witness statement earlier in the day, continued its silent work. Its battery life was dwindling, but it had enough power left to capture the full, unvarnished truth of the conspiracy being born. The footage we saw at the beginning was just the prelude. After Chief Nolan Reed laid out his plan, the lug nut, the focus on Marcus Thorne, Officer Ben Carter didn't immediately comply. He stood his ground, a young man fighting a losing battle against a superior who held all the cards. "Chief, with all due respect," Carter says, his voice tight with a tension that's almost audible. The camera is still focused on his back, but you can see his shoulders square up, a small act of defiance. "This feels premature. We have no witnesses placing Thorne's vehicle on that road. We have his alibi at the town hall. A single lug nut isn't enough to disregard all of that." Reed, who had been leaning back, sits up straight. The friendly mentor is gone, replaced by the hardened commander. The air in the room chills by several degrees. "Premature?" he repeats, his voice dangerously soft. "A woman is dead, Carter. Her family deserves justice, not a 6-month investigation that goes nowhere. They need closure. This town needs to know we are in control." "But it has to be the right person," Carter insists. "If we go after Thorne and we're wrong—" "We won't be wrong," Reed cuts him off, his voice rising in volume and intensity. "Because the evidence will prove us right. The lug nut is the start. We'll get a warrant for his shop. We'll find a truck with some minor, unexplained front-end damage. People bump into things all the time. We'll find fibers, we'll find something. You just have to know where to look, and you have to know how to present it." This is the moment the mask slips completely. Reed isn't talking about an investigation, he's talking about a construction project. He is laying out, brick by brick, how to build a case against a man he has already decided is guilty. "Sir," Carter says, and his voice is strained now, almost pleading, This is wrong. We can't manufacture a case." Reed stands up. He walks around the desk, closing the distance between them. He's a physically imposing man, and he uses his size to intimidate, to dominate the space. The camera now captures him in profile as he stands inches from Carter. "Listen to me, Ben," he says, his voice a low, menacing growl. "You're a good cop. You've got a bright future. Don't throw it away on a moment of misplaced idealism. You think justice is some perfect, clean thing. It's not. It's messy. Sometimes you have to grease the wheels to get the right result. Thorne is no saint. He's got a record. Maybe he didn't do this, but he's done other things. It evens out." The sheer cynicism of the statement is breathtaking. Reed is admitting, without admitting, that he doesn't care if Thorne is actually guilty. He is a convenient solution to a political problem. "I took an oath, Chief," Carter says, his voice barely a whisper. Reed scoffs, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "We all took an oath, but we live in the real world. And in the real world, loyalty matters. Loyalty to this department. Loyalty to this town. Loyalty to me." He places a hand on Carter's shoulder, a gesture that is meant to be paternal but feels more like a threat. "I'm giving you a chance to be on the right side of this, Ben. I'm giving you the key piece of evidence that's going to make you a hero. You're the one who's going to close the biggest case this town has seen in years." He squeezes Carter's shoulder. "Now go write your supplemental report, note the discovery of the evidence, and get a warrant request to me by morning. Don't make me ask you again." He turns and walks back to his desk, his back to Carter, a clear dismissal. The conversation is over. An order has been given. The camera continues to record as Ben Carter stands there for a long, agonizing moment. His straight-backed posture has wilted. He looks like a man who has just had the moral foundation of his world kicked out from under him. Finally, he turns. His face, seen for the first time, is ashen. His eyes are wide with a mixture of fear and dawning horror. He takes a step toward the door, then glances around the room, his eyes sweeping past the filing cabinet where the body camera sits. He doesn't see it. His mind is elsewhere, trapped in the impossible choice he's just been given. He walks out of the office, closing the door softly behind him. The camera records the closed door for another 2 minutes before the battery finally dies, the screen going black. But it has already captured enough. It has recorded the precise moment a protector became a conspirator, the moment an order became a crime, and the moment a young cop's loyalty was twisted into a weapon against an innocent man. The unblinking eye has seen the truth. The only question now is whether that truth will ever see the light of day. In the days following Marcus Thorne's arrest, Officer Ben Carter existed in a state of suspended animation. On the outside, he was the model officer. He completed his paperwork on time, his reports were immaculate, and his demeanor on patrol was as stoic and professional as ever. He was lauded by Chief Reed in department briefings for his sharp police work in the Gable case. To his colleagues, he was the young cop on the fast track, the one who had cracked a major case through simple, solid detective work. But on the inside, Carter was fraying at the seams. Every compliment from the chief felt like a fresh application of acid to an open wound. Every time he drove past Thorne's auto body, now shuttered with a closed sign hanging crookedly in the window, a wave of nausea washed over him. He wasn't sleeping. The conversation from Reed's office played on a loop in his mind, the chief's cynical words echoing in the quiet of his small apartment. It evens out. The body camera footage was a ticking time bomb in his possession. The day after the meeting, he had gone to retrieve the camera from the chief's office, his heart hammering in his chest, terrified that Reed had found it. But it was still there on the filing cabinet, exactly where he'd left it. He had taken it home, plugged it into his personal laptop, and watched the video. Seeing it, hearing it again, removed any ambiguity. It wasn't a heated conversation that had gone too far. It was a cold, premeditated crime, dictated by the most powerful man in his world. The file was now on a single, unmarked USB drive that he kept hidden in a box of old college textbooks. It felt both impossibly small and crushingly heavy. It was the truth. It was proof. But what could he do with it? His first instinct, the one his training and his conscience screamed at him to follow, was to become a whistleblower. He should go to the district attorney. He should go to the State Bureau of Investigation. He should report the chief. But then, the cold calculus of reality set in. Nolan Reed wasn't just his boss. He was a political powerhouse in the county. The DA, a man named Peterson, was a close personal friend of Reed's. They played golf together every other weekend. Would Peterson really torpedo his own political ally based on a video provided by a junior officer? Or would the video simply disappear? Would Carter suddenly find himself facing charges of insubordination, of illegally recording his superior, of trying to sabotage a major investigation? The State Bureau of Investigation was another option, but a risky one. The blue wall of silence wasn't just a myth. It was a powerful, unspoken code. Going outside the department, especially against a popular chief, was career suicide. He would be labeled a rat, a traitor. Even if he succeeded, even if Reed was brought down, Carter knew he'd be blacklisted. No department in the state would hire him. His life, the one he had worked so hard to build, would be over. And then there was the fear. Nolan Reed was not a man to be crossed. Carter had seen what happened to officers who fell out of favor. But this was different. This wasn't about a bad shift or a denied promotion. This was about exposing a felony. Reed was a cornered animal, and Carter knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that Reed would do anything to protect himself. Destroying Carter's career would be the least of it. So he did nothing. He was paralyzed by the weight of his secret. He went to work every day and played his part in the charade. He answered questions from the DA's office about the case, carefully sticking to the fabricated story of the investigation, his own words feeling like poison on his tongue. He saw the relief on the faces of people in town, the gratitude that the killer was off the streets. and it felt like a physical blow. He drove past Marcus Thorne's house one evening and saw Marcus's wife in the yard talking to a lawyer. Her face was a mask of grief and stress. She looked up and their eyes met for a brief second across the street. Carter saw no recognition, just the blank stare of a woman whose world had been shattered. He hit the accelerator and drove away, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He was trapped. To stay silent was to let an innocent man rot for a crime he didn't commit. To speak up was to risk his career, his safety, and his future. The USB drive in his apartment felt like a radioactive object, contaminating everything around it. It was more than just a video file, it was his conscience, digitized and stored on a tiny piece of plastic. And every day that he kept it hidden, the burden of it grew heavier, threatening to crush him completely. He knew he couldn't carry it forever. Something had to break. The breaking point for Ben Carter came not in a moment of dramatic confrontation, but in the sterile quiet of a courtroom hallway. He was at the county courthouse to give a pre-trial deposition in the case against Marcus Thorne. As he waited outside the conference room, he saw Marcus being led down the hall by two deputies, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, his hands and feet shackled. It was the first time Carter had seen him since the arrest. Marcus looked defeated. The fire of outrage Carter had seen on the day of the arrest was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed resignation. He had lost weight. His face was etched with the lines of sleepless nights and unrelenting stress. He was a man being systematically erased by the system Carter had sworn to serve. As Marcus passed, he looked up and his eyes met Carter's. This time there was recognition, and in his gaze, Carter saw not hatred, but a single devastating question. Why? That one look severed the last threads of Carter's paralysis. He could no longer be a passive participant in this injustice. The risk to his career, to his safety, no longer outweighed the moral certainty of what he had to do. But he knew he couldn't go through official channels. The system was compromised. Reed and his friend, the DA, would crush him before the story ever saw the light of day. He had to go outside the system entirely. He had to set a fire that no one could ignore. That night, he drove to a public library in a town 30 miles away. He used a public computer, creating a new anonymous email address through a secure service, something generic, untraceable. He knew exactly who to send the file to. There was a well-known police accountability activist, a man named David Sharp, who ran a popular YouTube channel called The People's Shield. Sharp wasn't a mainstream journalist. He was a bulldog, a former criminal defense investigator who now dedicated his life to exposing police misconduct. He had a massive online following and a reputation for being fearless, for vetting his sources meticulously, and for never backing down from a story. He was hated by law enforcement establishments across the country, which in Carter's mind made him the perfect recipient. He was an outsider, immune to the political pressures that would muzzle a local news outlet. Carter uploaded the video file. The progress bar on the screen seemed to move in slow motion, each percentage point a step further past the point of no return. His hands were shaking. He typed a short, simple message in the body of the email. Subject: the truth about the Harmony Creek hit-and-run body. This is the body camera footage from the office of Harmony Creek Police Chief Nolan Reed on the night of Eleanor Gable's death. He is framing an innocent man, Marcus Thorne. The real culprit is his cousin, Leo Vance. Please, get this out there. They are trying to bury this. He didn't sign his name. He didn't give any more details. The video had to speak for itself. He stared at the send button for a full minute, his own reflection looking back at him from the dark screen. This was it, the end of his life as he knew it, and the only chance at a new beginning for Marcus Thorne. He clicked the button. He closed the browser, meticulously cleared the history and cache, and logged off the computer. He walked out of the library into the cool night air, feeling strangely light. The crushing weight of the secret was gone, replaced by a terrifying, exhilarating sense of uncertainty. He had just thrown a grenade into the heart of Harmony Creek. He had no idea what the explosion would look like, but he knew with absolute certainty that the silence was finally over. Across the state, David Sharp was working late in his small home office, sifting through the dozens of tips and emails he received every day. Most were dead ends, conspiracy theories, or minor complaints. But then he saw the one from the anonymous address. The subject line caught his eye. He'd heard about the Harmony Creek case. It had received some regional news coverage as a swift and successful investigation. He clicked it open, read the brief message, and his journalistic instincts went on high alert. He downloaded the attached file. As he watched the video, his initial skepticism melted away into cold, hard fury. He watched it once, then a second time, taking notes, then a third, analyzing every word, every nuance. It was all there. The pressure, the conspiracy, the casual, chilling cynicism of a man in power abusing his oath. It was irrefutable. It was explosive. It was the kind of story that didn't just expose a corrupt chief, but indicted an entire system that allowed a man like him to flourish. David Sharp picked up his phone and called his lawyer. "You're not going to believe what just landed in my inbox," he said. "And we're going to need to move fast, because the town of Harmony Creek is about to become the center of the universe." The video dropped on a Tuesday morning. David Sharp didn't just upload it to his YouTube channel, he orchestrated its release like a military campaign. He sent advance, embargoed copies to several national news outlets and civil rights organizations, ensuring that when the story broke, it broke everywhere, all at once. The title of the video was simple and devastating. Chief of Police caught on camera manufacturing a case. For the first few hours in Harmony Creek, life went on as normal. People went to work, got their morning coffee, and talked about the weather. Then around 10 a.m., the first tremors were felt. Phones started buzzing with notifications. A local news station in the state capital broke away from its regular programming for a special report. The Harmony Creek Herald, the same paper that had lionized Nolan Reed as a hero, posted a link to the video on its website with a headline that screamed, "Chief Reed implicated in hit-and-run cover-up scandal." By noon, the town was in a state of collective shock. People huddled in break rooms and on street corners, watching the damning footage on their phones. They saw the man they trusted, their golden boy, calmly and methodically plotting to frame one of their own. They heard him talk about Marcus Thorne not as a citizen to be protected, but as a convenient narrative, a pawn to be sacrificed for the sake of appearances. The illusion of Harmony Creek, the carefully maintained facade of peace and order, shattered. The town square, usually a symbol of quiet community, became the staging ground for news vans from across the country. Reporters with microphones and cameras swarmed the small police station and the town hall, their presence an invasive symbol of the town's sudden, unwanted notoriety. Mayor Thompson, a portly, mild-mannered man who was more comfortable cutting ribbons than handling crises, was caught completely flat-footed. He barricaded himself in his office, refusing all comment while he and the town's attorney tried to figure out how to respond to an event so far outside their realm of experience. Their first move was a panicked, defensive one. They issued a terse statement saying they were aware of the video and had placed Chief Reed on paid administrative leave pending a full and thorough investigation. The statement did nothing to quell the growing firestorm. In fact, it was like throwing gasoline on it. Protesters began to gather outside the police station. It started with just a few of Marcus Thorne's friends and family, holding handwritten signs that read, "Free Marcus Thorne" and "Justice for Marcus." But as the day wore on, their numbers swelled. People who barely knew Marcus, people who had believed the official story, now stood alongside his family, their faces a mixture of anger and shame. They were angry at the betrayal by law enforcement and ashamed that they had been so easily deceived. Inside the Harmony Creek Police Department, there was chaos and confusion. The officers' phones were ringing off the hook with calls from friends, family, and reporters. They were adrift, their leader suddenly gone, their department's reputation in ruins. Some were furious, feeling betrayed by Reed. Others were defensive, refusing to believe the video was real, claiming it was a deep fake or an edited fake. The blue wall of silence was still there, but for the first time, deep cracks were beginning to show. Ben Carter, at his desk, tried to look as shocked as everyone else, his heart pounding with a terror that was now mixed with a profound sense of relief. The truth was out. The bomb had detonated. The story was no longer just about a corrupt chief. It had become a national symbol of a broken justice system. Civil rights leaders called for an immediate federal investigation. Legal analysts on cable news dissected the video, condemning Reed's actions as a textbook case of official misconduct and obstruction of justice. The name of Harmony Creek, once a source of local pride, was now a byword for corruption. The town wasn't just a location anymore. It was a headline. It was a community under siege, not by an external threat, but by the ugly truth of what had been happening within its own halls of power, a truth that had been exposed for the whole world to see. Placed on administrative leave and holed up in his suburban home, Nolan Reed was not a man wallowing in defeat. He was a predator backed into a corner, and that made him more dangerous than ever. The public outcry, the media swarm, the mayor's weak-kneed statement. He saw it all not as a reckoning, but as an attack. An attack on his career, his reputation, and his authority. And Nolan Reed never let an attack go unanswered. While the town was reeling, Reed was strategizing. He couldn't deny the video's authenticity. Its digital footprint would be too easy to verify. So he chose a different path. He would control the narrative around it. He would discredit the source, muddy the waters, and paint himself as the victim of a malicious, politically motivated plot. He hired a high-powered, notoriously aggressive attorney from the state capitol, a man known for defending embattled police officers. Within 24 hours of the video's release, they held a press conference on the manicured lawn of Reed's house. It was a piece of political theater, designed to project strength and defiance. Reed stood at the podium, his face a mask of weary resolve, his wife standing dutifully by his side. He didn't look like a disgraced official. He looked like a leader under fire. "What you saw in that video was a gross distortion of reality," he began, his voice ringing with practiced sincerity. "That was a private conversation, illegally recorded and edited, taken completely out of context. I was playing devil's advocate with a young officer, pushing him, testing his theories, ensuring that we had an ironclad case against a dangerous suspect. This is what good police work looks like. It's messy, it's tough, but it's how we keep communities like ours safe." It was a bold, audacious lie, delivered with the conviction of a man who believed he could make anyone believe anything. He went on to insinuate that the video was leaked by someone with a grudge, someone trying to undermine the police department for their own political gain. He never said Ben Carter's name, but the implication was clear. His next move was more direct, a surgical strike aimed at the heart of the threat. Even though he was on leave, he still held immense influence within the department. He made a call to his loyalist deputy chief. The order was simple: find the leaker. The department, now acting as Reed's personal enforcement arm, launched an aggressive internal affairs investigation. But it wasn't an investigation into the cover-up. It was a witch hunt for the whistleblower. They began by seizing the department-issued laptops and phones of every officer who had access to the case file, looking for any digital evidence of the leak. Ben Carter knew they were coming for him. He had been careful, using a public library, an anonymous email, but he knew that a determined investigation could potentially trace his steps. The pressure was immense. His colleagues, once friendly, now looked at him with suspicion. Whispers followed him down the hallways. He was isolated, a pariah within the very walls he used to call a second home. Reed's strategy culminated in a direct attack on Carter. The deputy chief called Carter into his office. On the desk was a file. "Officer Carter," the deputy began, his voice cold and official. "During our review of department equipment, we found irregularities in your body camera's chain of custody logs for the night of the incident. Furthermore, We have reason to believe you have been in contact with known anti-police activists. Effective immediately, you are suspended without pay, pending the outcome of this investigation. It was a sham, and they both knew it. There were no irregularities. It was a pretext to neutralize him, to officially brand him as a rogue officer and discredit him as a witness before he could ever testify. By suspending him, Reed was sending a powerful message to any other officer who might consider speaking out. This is what happens when you cross me. Reed's counteroffensive was brutal and effective. In the court of public opinion, he had created doubt. He had framed the scandal not as a case of corruption, but as a battle between a tough, dedicated police chief and a disgruntled, rule-breaking subordinate. He had seized control of the narrative, using the power and resources of the very department he had corrupted to protect himself. He wasn't just trying to save his career, he was trying to crush the man who had dared to expose him, and he was using the full weight of the system to do it. While Nolan Reed was waging a war for his reputation, a quieter, more profound battle was being fought for Marcus Thorne's life. Since the day of his arrest, Marcus had been sitting in a cell at the county jail, unable to make the exorbitant bail set by a judge who had only heard the prosecution's version of events. His business was closed, his savings were evaporating into legal fees, and his family was being torn apart by the stress and shame of it all. He was a man drowning, abandoned by the very community he had served for decades. The release of the body camera footage was the first glimmer of hope in that suffocating darkness. It was a lifeline. The video didn't just create a public outcry, it fundamentally changed the legal landscape of the case. The public defender assigned to Marcus, an overworked young lawyer juggling 100 other cases, immediately recognized the video as a bombshell. But she also knew she was outmatched by the resources the DA's office and Nolan Reed's legal team would bring to bear. The story, however, had attracted powerful allies. A renowned civil rights attorney from a major city, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, who had built her career fighting wrongful convictions, heard about the case. She watched the video and saw in it a pattern of misconduct she had seen time and time again. She flew to Harmony Creek and met with Marcus in the jail's bleak visitation room. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice calm but radiating a fierce intensity. "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I've seen the video. I believe you are an innocent man, and I want to represent you, pro bono." For the first time since his arrest, Marcus felt a surge of something other than despair. With Jenkins leading his defense, the dynamic shifted. She wasn't just a lawyer, she was a fighter, and she immediately went on the offensive. Her first move was to file an emergency motion for Marcus's immediate release, arguing that the video proved the entire case against him was built on a foundation of lies and fabricated evidence. She attached a sworn affidavit from a digital forensics expert who authenticated the video, confirming it was a single, unedited recording. Next, she filed a motion to have all charges dismissed with prejudice, meaning they could never be brought again. Her legal brief was a scathing indictment of the Harmony Creek Police Department and Chief Reed. She systematically dismantled the prosecution's case piece by piece. The lug nut? Fruit of a poisonous tree planted by the chief himself. The surveillance? It showed no suspicious behavior. The supposed motive? Non-existent. The arrest of Marcus Thorne was not the result of an investigation, she argued in her motion. It was the final act of a criminal conspiracy orchestrated by Chief Nolan Reed to protect the true perpetrator and create a scapegoat. To continue this prosecution is not just a miscarriage of justice, it is a continuation of that crime. The district attorney, Peterson, found himself in an impossible position. His friend, Nolan Reed, was publicly claiming the video was a doctored smear job. But the evidence presented by Sarah Jenkins was compelling, and more importantly, it was now part of the public record. Continuing to prosecute Marcus Thorne in the face of such overwhelming evidence of his innocence would be political suicide and a gross ethical violation. The national media was watching his every move. At the emergency bail hearing, the judge, who had previously been so quick to deny bail, now looked deeply uncomfortable. Sarah Jenkins, poised and relentless, played the video in open court. The sound of Nolan Reed's voice, calmly ordering Ben Carter to frame an innocent man, filled the courtroom. The air crackled with tension. Marcus Thorne sat at the defense table, his wife weeping silently in the gallery behind him. The judge had no choice. He granted the motion for release. Marcus Thorne was freed on his own recognizance. He walked out of the courthouse, blinking in the bright afternoon sun, and into the arms of his weeping wife. He was free from his cell, but he was not yet free from the charge that hung over his head. The battle for his name, for his complete exoneration, was far from over. But for the first time, victory seemed possible. The video had not just opened his cell door, it had kicked down the door to the courtroom and flooded the case with a light that the prosecution could no longer ignore. With the case against Marcus Thorne crumbling, the glaring question that had been simmering under the surface of the scandal finally boiled over. If Marcus didn't do it, who did? Ben Carter's anonymous email had provided the answer. The real culprit is his cousin, Leo Vance. David Sharp, the activist who broke the story, had initially withheld that name from his public report, choosing to focus on the irrefutable evidence in the video first. He wanted to ensure Marcus Thorne's freedom was the primary focus. But with Marcus released and the official case in shambles, Sharp released a follow-up report, publishing the name and a photograph of Leo Vance. Suddenly, the investigation had a new target, and this target was nowhere to be found. Leo Vance had become a ghost. The moment the video hit the internet, he knew his borrowed time was up. Nolan's protection had been absolute, but it couldn't shield him from a viral video seen by millions. While Harmony Creek was descending into chaos, Leo was packing a duffel bag with cash, a change of clothes, and a burner phone. He abandoned his car at a bus station 3 towns over, a deliberate misdirection, and then had a friend, one who owed him a big favor and knew to keep his mouth shut, drive him 200 miles in the opposite direction. The state police, now under immense pressure from the governor's office to take over the investigation from the compromised Harmony Creek PD, issued a BOLO, be on the lookout alert for Leo Vance. His face was plastered on the evening news and across social media. He was now the most wanted man in the state. The manhunt began. Investigators descended on Leo's small, messy apartment, finding it hastily abandoned. They interviewed his friends, his co-workers, his family members, everyone except Nolan Reed, who was legally firewalled by his own pending investigation. The picture that emerged was of a man living on the margins, a man with a string of minor offenses, a history of reckless behavior, and a deep-seated resentment of his cousin's success, tempered by a reliance on his protection. State detectives traced the initial pings of his burner phone to a cell tower near a major interstate, but the trail went cold almost immediately. Leo was smarter than they gave him credit for. He was using cash, staying off the grid, and likely moving constantly. The search for Leo Vance became a parallel drama playing out alongside the legal battles in Harmony Creek. For the public, he was the missing piece of the puzzle, the man whose capture would finally confirm the truth of the video and seal Nolan Reed's fate. His absence was a source of immense frustration. To Mrs. Gable's grieving family, he was the man who had actually taken her life, and his freedom was a daily torment. For Nolan Reed, Leo's disappearance was both a blessing and a curse. As long as Leo remained free, there was no direct witness to contradict his version of events. There was no one to testify about that frantic phone call from the side of the road. But Leo's flight was also a tacit admission of guilt, which made Reed's impassioned defense of the Marcus Thorne investigation look even more like the criminal obstruction it was. The manhunt stretched from days into a week, then 2. The ghost who ran was a constant presence in his absence. Every news report about the scandal ended with the same question: where is Leo Vance? His empty apartment, his abandoned car, the cold phone trail. They were all pieces of a story about a man who had vanished just before the truth could catch him. But in the modern world, no one can run forever. The net was tightening, and Leo Vance knew that with every passing day, the time he had bought himself with that panicked, desperate run was quickly running out. While the world watched the manhunt for Leo Vance, another, quieter collapse was happening inside the Harmony Creek Police Department. Nolan Reed's iron-fisted control, built over years of patronage and intimidation, was beginning to rust. The video hadn't just exposed the chief, it had exposed the fragility of the loyalty he commanded. The suspension of Ben Carter was meant to be a show of force, a warning to anyone else who might have a conscience. But it backfired. The younger officers, many of whom had respected Carter, saw the move for what it was, a vindictive punishment of a whistleblower, not a legitimate internal affairs investigation. The older, more cynical veterans, who had long understood Reed's manipulative nature, saw it as a sign of desperation. The king was wounded, and the castle walls were starting to crumble. The state police takeover of the hit-and-run investigation was the biggest blow. Suddenly, there were outsiders in their house. State investigators set up a temporary command post in a borrowed conference room at the town hall, deliberately avoiding the police station. They began re-interviewing every HCPD officer involved in the original case. These weren't friendly chats over coffee. They were formal, recorded interrogations, with the implicit threat that lying to a state investigator was a felony. Under the heat of this external pressure, the blue wall of silence, which had seemed so impenetrable, began to show hairline cracks. An officer from the evidence room, a woman nearing retirement who had always disliked Reed's arrogance, found a misfiled dispatch log from the night of the accident. The log showed the precise time of the 911 call from the motorist who found Mrs. Gable. More importantly, it showed that Nolan Reed had not radioed in his own response to the scene until a full 20 minutes after the initial call went out. A strange delay for a chief who prided himself on being hands-on. Where was he during those 20 minutes? The log didn't say, but it created a timeline that directly contradicted Reed's official statement. The evidence officer quietly and anonymously slipped a copy of the log under the door of the state investigator's command post. Another crack appeared in the form of a patrol sergeant, a man who Reed had passed over for promotion in favor of a younger loyalist. During his interview with the state police, he casually mentioned that the chief's cousin, Leo Vance, had a new black Ford F-250 that wasn't yet officially registered in the county database. Probably just an oversight, the sergeant said with a shrug, but the information was passed on with deliberate intent. It was a small act of rebellion, a way of settling an old score while serving the cause of justice. Even Ben Carter, suspended and isolated at home, was contributing to the erosion. Before his suspension, he had printed out a copy of the original unedited incident report he had filed from the scene, the one that made no mention of a lug nut. He had kept it, anticipating that the official version in the record system might be altered. He gave the printout to his lawyer, who in turn passed it to Sarah Jenkins and the state investigators. It was another piece of documentary evidence that proved the chief's story was a fabrication, created after the fact. Nolan Reed could feel his grip slipping. He was legally barred from interfering with the state's investigation, and he could no longer communicate directly with his officers about the case. He was cut off, watching from the sidelines as the system he had built to protect himself was being dismantled from within. The whispers in the hallways of his own station were no longer about loyalty to him, but about survival. Officers were lawyering up, protecting themselves. The instinct for self-preservation was beginning to override the culture of silence he had so carefully cultivated. The cracks were small, but they were spreading, weakening the foundation of his power. Each anonymous tip, each forgotten detail suddenly remembered, each piece of paper that mysteriously appeared was a testament to the fact that his authority was broken. The blue wall hadn't crumbled in one dramatic explosion. It was being taken apart, brick by brick, by the very people he had once commanded. The tip that finally broke the manhunt open came from a place Leo Vance had thought was safe: the past. An ex-girlfriend, a woman he'd dated a few years back and parted with on bad terms, recognized his face on a news report. She remembered him talking about a cousin who owned a small, run-down fishing cabin hundreds of miles away in a forgotten corner of the state near the border. It was the kind of place a person could disappear to. She hesitated for a day, torn between old loyalties and her own conscience, before finally making an anonymous call to the state police tip line. It was the lead they had been waiting for. A team of state troopers, armed with a warrant and tactical gear, drove through the night. They found the cabin, but it was empty, a layer of undisturbed dust covering the furniture. It seemed like another dead end. But as they were about to leave, one of the troopers noticed fresh tire tracks leading away from the cabin, heading not toward the main road, but deeper into a state forest. They followed. The tracks led them to a desolate single-story motel on a lonely highway, the kind of place with a flickering neon sign and rooms that rented by the week. The manager, a weary-looking man who had seen it all, confirmed that a man matching Leo's description had checked in 2 days ago, paying in cash under a fake name. He was in room 7. They didn't storm the door. They evacuated the adjacent rooms quietly, set up a perimeter, and tried to make contact. A negotiator with a bullhorn spoke into the pre-dawn stillness. "Leo Vance, this is the state police. We have the building surrounded. We know you are in there. We want to end this peacefully. Come out with your hands up." Inside room 7, Leo was jolted awake. He scrambled to the window, peeked through the blinds, and saw the flashing lights. A wave of pure animal terror washed over him. His run was over. For 2 weeks, he had been living on a diet of gas station food and raw fear, constantly looking over his shoulder, jumping at every siren. He knew this moment was coming, but the reality of it was 1,000 times worse. He was trapped. His mind raced through his options, all of them bad. A lifetime in prison. Facing Mrs. Gable's family, facing his cousin, Nolan. The weight of what he had done, of the life he had taken and the chaos he had caused, pressed down on him. He was not a hardened criminal. He was a weak man who had made a terrible mistake and then compounded it by running. He had no weapon, no plan. All he had was desperation. "I'm not coming out," he yelled through the closed door, his voice cracking. "Leave me alone!" The negotiator kept talking, his voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the panic spiraling inside the motel room. For an hour, the standoff continued. Leo paced the small room like a caged animal, growing more erratic, yelling threats 1 minute and sobbing the next. The troopers outside were patient, but they were prepared for the worst. They didn't know his state of mind. They didn't know if he was armed. His desperation made him unpredictable. Finally, something inside Leo broke. The adrenaline faded, replaced by an all-consuming exhaustion. He couldn't run anymore. He couldn't fight. He just wanted it to be over. He began to cry, deep, ragged sobs of a man who had lost everything. He slid to the floor, his back against the door. "Okay," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Okay, I'm done." He slowly opened the door and shuffled out into the harsh glare of the police spotlights, his hands raised in surrender. He was blinking, disheveled, a shell of the cocky man who had been so proud of his new truck just a few weeks earlier. As the troopers cuffed him and led him to a waiting car, Leo Vance looked less like a dangerous fugitive and more like what he was, a scared, broken man, finally captured by the consequences he had tried so desperately to outrun. The ghost had been caught, and with his capture, the final pillar of Nolan Reed's elaborate wall of lies was about to come crashing down. Leo Vance's interrogation didn't take long. Stripped of his freedom and facing the terrifying reality of a long-term prison sentence for felony hit and run and evading arrest, he had no fight left in him. His court-appointed lawyer advised him that his only path to any kind of leniency was full cooperation. He sat in a small, windowless room at the state police barracks, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, and he told them everything. The story poured out of him, a torrent of guilt, fear, and resentment. He started with the beers at the bar, the reckless driving, the horrifying moment of impact. He described finding Mrs. Gable in the ditch, his cold panic, and the phone call that changed everything. This was what the investigators were waiting for. They let him talk, their questions gentle, prodding him for details. "And what exactly did your cousin Chief Reed say to you on that call?" the lead investigator asked. "He told me not to move, not to talk to anyone," Leo said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Then he told me to take the truck to the old quarry. He told me to wipe it down for prints and to walk home through the woods so no one would see me. He said he would handle it." "Handle what exactly, Leo?" "The scene, the cops, everything," Leo mumbled, staring down at the table. "He said he would take care of it. He's always taken care of things for me, my whole life." There it was, a direct first-hand account of the cover-up from the moment it began. It was the testimony that connected Nolan Reed not just to the obstruction of justice, but to the very genesis of the crime itself. But Leo wasn't finished. He went on to describe the next few days, the frantic, whispered phone calls with Nolan. He told them how Nolan had called him the night of the arrest of Marcus Thorne. "He told me they had their man," Leo said. "He told me not to worry, that they'd pinned it on some mechanic in town. He said the guy had a record and it would stick. He told me to just lay low and keep my mouth shut and everything would blow over." This was the final, devastating piece. It proved that Reed's actions weren't just a spur-of-the-moment decision to protect his cousin. It was a sustained, deliberate conspiracy. He had knowingly and actively participated in framing an innocent man and had kept his cousin, the real killer, informed every step of the way. The investigators asked him if he knew where the idea of the lug nut came from. Leo shook his head. "That was all him. Nolan was smart. He was the one who came up with the plan. I just did what he told me to do." He signed a full, sworn statement. By the time he was finished, he had given the state everything they needed. His confession was a guided missile aimed at the heart of Nolan Reed's defense. It obliterated Reed's claim that he was testing a young officer, or that the video was out of context. It provided the context, the motive, and the play-by-play of the entire criminal enterprise. When the district attorney's office, now with a special prosecutor assigned to the case to avoid the conflict of interest with D.A. Peterson, was given a copy of Leo's confession, they knew it was over. The video had been the fire. The confession was the accelerant. The next day, a grand jury was convened. They heard testimony from the state investigators, they reviewed the body camera footage, and they read the signed confession of Leo Vance. It took them less than an hour to hand down an indictment. Nolan Reed, the once untouchable king of Harmony Creek, was charged with multiple felonies: obstruction of justice, official misconduct, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy. The news of his indictment was the final, shuddering tremor that brought the ruins of his career crashing to the ground. He had tried to silence a whisper in a machine, but in the end, it was the confession of the man he tried to protect that became the shout no one could ignore. The fall of Nolan Reed was as swift and total as his rise had been celebrated. He turned himself in at the county courthouse, not the police station he had once commanded. The cameras captured the image that would define his legacy. The former chief, stripped of his uniform and his authority, being led in handcuffs by the same state troopers who had hunted down his cousin. The Golden Boy was tarnished beyond repair. In the wake of his indictment, the pieces of the justice system began to slowly, painfully, grind back into place. The special prosecutor officially dropped all charges against Marcus Thorne, issuing a public, formal apology to him and his family on the courthouse steps. Marcus was, at last, a free and innocent man in the eyes of the law. He stood beside his wife, his face a mixture of profound relief and deep, weary sadness. His name was cleared, but the scars of the ordeal, the financial ruin, the public humiliation, the loss of his faith in the system, would take much longer to heal. Ben Carter was reinstated to the Harmony Creek Police Department, his suspension lifted. The internal affairs investigation against him was unceremoniously dropped. He returned to his job a changed man. He was no longer the idealistic young officer who saw the world in black and white. He was hailed as a hero by some, a pariah by others within the fractured department. He walked a lonely path, a man who had done the right thing at a terrible cost, forever marked by the choice he had made. Leo Vance, in exchange for his testimony against his cousin, pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of a fatal accident. He was sentenced to prison, his recklessness and his cowardice finally catching up to him. The town of Harmony Creek was left to pick up the pieces. The scandal had ripped away their comfortable illusions, forcing them to confront the darkness that had festered beneath the surface of their idyllic community. The trust between the citizens and the police was shattered, and the long process of rebuilding it would fall to a new interim chief, brought in from outside to reform the department. Nolan Reed's trial was a formality. Faced with the irrefutable video and his own cousin's testimony, he accepted a plea bargain. He was sentenced to prison, trading his chief's badge for a prisoner's number. The man who had demanded loyalty above all else found himself utterly alone, abandoned by the system he had manipulated and the town he had betrayed. The story of Harmony Creek became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of how easily power can corrupt and how an entire system can be bent to serve the will of one man. It was a story of profound failure, but also one of quiet courage. The courage of an officer who risked everything for the truth, and the resilience of an innocent man who refused to be broken. As the news cameras leave and the headlines fade, what remains is the quiet aftermath in a town forever changed. This is where we need to look closer, not at the crime, but at the conditions that allowed it to happen. What drove Nolan Reed, a man who had everything, respect, power, a bright future, to throw it all away to protect his reckless cousin? It wasn't just about family loyalty, it was about control. In Reed's mind, an unsolved crime was a flaw in his perfect record, a chink in the armor of the flawless town he ruled. His ambition had become a pathology, a hunger to maintain a perfect image at any cost. He saw Marcus Thorne not as a person, but as a convenient solution, a variable he could manipulate to solve his equation. The system didn't just fail, it was wielded as a weapon by a man who had come to believe he was above the law he was sworn to enforce. Could this have been stopped sooner? What if Officer Carter, instead of being paralyzed by fear, had found a trusted senior officer to confide in? Perhaps a quiet, internal rebellion could have taken root before the lie grew so large. What if Marcus Thorne, from the moment of his arrest, had been met not with suspicion, but with the fundamental principle of innocent until proven guilty? If the system had paused, had listened to his alibi, had questioned the sudden appearance of a single convenient piece of evidence, this tragedy could have been averted. The story of Harmony Creek is a powerful lesson in the danger of unchecked authority and the immense courage it takes to question it. It reminds us that justice is not a self-sustaining force. It is a fragile construct that relies on the integrity of every single person within the system. This story leaves us with so many questions. What do you think is the best way to ensure accountability when those in power are the ones breaking the law? How does a community begin to rebuild trust after such a profound betrayal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you believe stories like this need to be told, please consider supporting the channel.